Well, thank you all so much for having me. This is my first time speaking to the Plant Society, so I'm excited about that. I'm sure most of y'all know more about a wider range of plants than me. All right, so we're gonna start by talking about like what trees to pick. So obviously native and adaptive to our local environmental conditions, tolerant of our local temperature extremes and our precipitation. And then of course our soil conditions as well. Of course we want to choose non-native or not detrimental trees and that are preferably multifunctional in the landscape. So soils, in the hill country we have alkaline soils, which means a pH of greater than 6. And so right there is a picture of a magnolia tree that was planted a while ago at my office, actually in Kerrville, and you can see it's chlorotic because this is a species that's adapted to acidic soil. So far east Texas and into Louisiana, which we don't have those types of soils here. So that's the kind of problem that you run into when you choose a species that isn't adaptive and native to this area. And then our motto is right tree, right place, making sure that you're picking the right tree for the available space that you have. So this is a really nice graphic. And at the end, I'm going to show you all this website because it's really useful. You can pick your county and then what kind of characteristics you want in a tree and then, the available space that you have and things like that. But again, species selection is so important. So you see on the left, there's a bald cypress and a tiny little square in a parking lot. And we know that bald cypress trees have those nubby, far-reaching roots. And so that's going to struggle in that spot. And then in the middle, we have I believe a live oak growing up into the utility lines. So not a lot of forethought there. And then the last picture, you have that tall column tree growing up into the roof line. So you need to take into consideration, the shape of the tree. Let me move there we go. Consider the size and the shape that the tree is going to end up being, and that's called a tree's habit. So you have excurrent trees that grow from a straight central leader, and then you have decurrent trees like a live oak that spread out and have many branches. And then obviously again, tree size, the height, the spread, and considering the root zone. And so many people picture, trees to be a mirror image from what's above ground and what's below ground, but really, trees have very far-reaching and shallow roots, and most of the major roots are in that top 18 inches of the soil. And so you can see on this diagram, it's showing that the roots can go 1/2 to 2 times the height of the tree. And for trees like live oaks in the hill country, the roots can really go 2 to 3 times the height. So even further reaching and more shallow. So picking a tree, what should we look for? High quality trees and knowledgeable staff to help you out. Most trees come in containers. And so you're looking for an adequate sized root ball. So about 10 inches of root ball per inch caliper, meaning per inch of trunk that you have. And the biggest tree isn't always the best tree, although it's tempting to get those bigger trees in the ground. Smaller trees typically have a better chance of survival when planted versus larger trees. So like your 1, 3, and 5 gallon trees can adapt better to the native soils rather than a 15-gallon tree might be able to adapt to the soils. And then after 10 to 15 years, sometimes those smaller trees maybe will be bigger than the trees that started out bigger, that you planted bigger and healthier. So this little diagram helps with, looking at what you can see while in the nursery. So we want to buy trees that have a single trunk, or what we call a leader. You want to make sure there's no wounds on it, of course, and that you can actually see the trunk flare. So that part where the trunk starts to flare at the bottom. And then healthy roots, so they shouldn't be circling the pot. Versus on the other side, you can see the roots are starting to circle. If roots are poking out of the container, that might mean that it already needed to be repotted into a bigger container. And so especially when you see roots poking out the bottom, make sure to try to pop the root ball out and look for the circling roots, because you really don't want to deal with that. And then avoiding, double leaders, like that, like you see there, and then yellow leaves or any other damage. Okay, so preparing the site for planting. Your planting hole should be at least twice the width of the tree or the root ball, or wider, but it should not be deeper than the depth of the root ball. Square planting holes can be beneficial in clay soils, just so that the roots can penetrate the corners and get past the clay soil. Not really an issue that much here. And then you can score the edges of the planting hole just to prevent glazing. And they should be filled with water prior to planting to see how well it drains in that area. So if there's water remaining in that hole, that's not a good drainage site, which might be okay for like a bald cypress, but not for a live oak. So take that into consideration too. Again, inspect the tree for girdling roots and things like that. Only prune if those conditions exist, like a double leader. We want to make sure we get rid of that and the girdling roots. Remove anything that's not organic, tags, wires, pots, bags, anything like that. Handle the tree by the root ball. And then we don't really, some people have learned to balance the root to the crown ratio when they're planting. And if we were in a room, I would ask all why, but I'll go ahead and answer. We don't want to prune excessively or really at all if it's not necessary when planting, because we want those, we want the energy of the tree to go into root establishment and growing strong roots. We don't want the tree to have to worry about sealing any cuts or producing more leaves after taking some away. So place the tree in the hole at or slightly above natural grade, so we don't want the base of the tree lower than the ground. Use the same soil that came out of the hole to backfill. So, making sure we're using the native soil for the tree so that it can adapt to the native soil and what's there. Settle the soil with water. Stake the tree only if necessary, only if it really needs it. And then remove the stakes after a year. That's really important. And then again, kind of similar to why we don't want to prune trees at planting, we also don't want to fertilize, because typically fertilizers promote stem and leaf growth. And again, we want that first year for the tree to really concentrate on root establishment and getting a strong root system. And then adding a layer of mulch is really great for the plant, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So this is a diagram of just a good planting. The main takeaways is that the flare of the tree is above ground, and that the hole is 2 times as wide as the root ball. All right, so when to plant, I'm sure y'all know this, but fall or winter is best to plant a tree. And that's because our summers are just too hot. So the National Arbor Day is in April, but we have, a Texas Arbor Day in November, because April's too late to plant a tree. Those roots aren't going to have enough time to establish themselves before the heat of the summer. So now is a great time to plant a tree. And then once planted, you want to leave the lower branches, although it might be tempting to prune some of those away. Leaving those actually promotes a stronger root system and a better trunk taper. So we really do like to see that nice flare on trees. And it just provides food for the tree. The leaves are the food source. I actually found this little graphic today. I really like it. It shows after 3 or 4 years, most of those lower branches are still there. And then after 5 to 7 years, that's when you really establish the lower branches that are going to stay there. So that's, you know, about 5 or 7 years later, that's when you really have raised it up to the level that you want to permanently leave that tree at. All right, mulching. So a 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch is recommended, up to but not touching the trunk. So it's really important that the mulch does not touch the trunk of the tree. Spread over the entire root zone. People ask me, how far do I go out? And, you know, 20 feet, your whole yard is ideal, you know, from a tree person perspective. But a nice ring around the tree is going to be very beneficial. And what we don't want to do is volcano mulch, which is that picture on the left. And unfortunately, some of our trees at HEB have some volcano mulch around them. But that can add a lot of extra and unwanted moisture at the base of the tree, which can cause rotting and welcome insects that we don't want at the base of the tree. So on the right, that's the proper mulching technique. You can see the flare of the tree completely, and that's what we like to see. All right, so watering young trees. Planted trees need about 5 gallons per diameter inch of trunk, 1 to 2 times per week. Of course, if it's raining, account for that. And then we always want slow waterings, nice soak, deep soaks. And then you can always utilize a soil ring with your mulch to slowly water a tree. You can also use soaker hoses and water bags, and then continue that for the first 1 to 2 years, ideally. And then in wintertime, so roots are still active when temperatures are above 40 degrees or higher, so you can continue watering your trees if it's above 40. And you want to fully soak the ground about 2 times each month. And it's actually beneficial to water right before a hard freeze because water is a good insulator for the tree. And if those cells are full of water, they can overcome any cold damage that might occur. And then for watering your mature trees, so generally that's not necessary. Just in severe droughts, especially if they are native trees, they should be, you know, adapted to our, you know, changing levels of precipitation. But if it is a drought, water all soil under the tree canopy enough to wet the top 12 inches of soil. Don't concentrate the water at the base of the tree, and only like every 2 to 4 weeks in a drought. And then also you can always do the screwdriver test, where you just stick a screwdriver in the soil, and if it can't get far down into the ground, it might be time to water. If it's soaking wet, then obviously you don't need to water your trees. All right, so going into some native trees, split it up into categories. We have large, medium, fall color, flowering trees, wildlife trees, and other nice trees. Are there any questions in the chat though? Let me see. Where is the chat? Okay, if you do get a tree with circling roots, how do you handle those roots prior to planting? So yeah, I mean, you really want to avoid that, you know, in the first place, but you can go ahead and prune those roots that are circling. You definitely don't want to plant it when it's circling, just because that can cause, you know, constriction on other roots. So you can go ahead and prune those free so that they are sticking out straight. Glazing is just when, kind of like in pottery, like when you glaze something and seal it. So in like a clay soil, glazing could mean where like it kind of makes the soil slick and the roots can't penetrate past that. Keeping the trunk trash help with trunk. Does keeping the trunk trash help with trunk development? I actually haven't heard of the term trunk trash. So if that person wants to explain that or unmute themselves, you're welcome to.
It's the spurious growth that's coming out of the trunk, the small branches coming out of the trunk below.
Like little sprouts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they're small, you can go ahead and get rid of that. We're just talking about, you know, the main bigger branches that are low on a young tree. You want to keep those. But little sprouts, yeah, you can remove those.
But the question is, do they help with
the trunk development?
Growth of the central trunk?
So if typically sprouts are kind of growing up, not out like regular branches. So that wouldn't necessarily help trunk development. If it appears that there only is a sprout, then I would leave them. Yeah, anything that's not, if it's pointing in a strange way, you do want to get rid of that just so it doesn't turn into something where it's like rubbing against another trunk or possibly turning into a secondary leader or something like that. Can you explain what is happening when you prune?
Would you repeat the question out loud so everybody can get it? Because some of those are directed privately to you.
Oh, right. The question was, does keeping the trunk trash help with trunk development? And so I would say if it's just a sprout, no, but a branch I would keep. Because yes, it will help with trunk development. I got a question about ball moss. I'll go ahead and answer that. So ball moss is an air plant, an epiphyte, and so it really doesn't need anything from itself. It's most just finding a place to hang out on trees. So in a healthy tree, if you'll notice, like if you walk under a live oak and you look up, you're going to see a lot of ball moss. But if you step away and look at the tree from a distance, you really won't notice as much because the ball moss isn't on the top of the tree. So ball moss really likes the under canopy, the branches that the tree has already shaded out itself. And so a lot of people like to blame the ball moss, but really in the under canopy of a tree, the tree shaded that branch and it is no longer putting resources to making leaves on those branches, so that in the spot, the ball moss likes that and just decides to hang out there. It likes filtered sunlight and the added humidity underneath that canopy. So that's where you'll typically see ball moss. With a struggling or weak tree, that's when you'll see ball moss start to kind of take over the tree. And so after things like oak wilt or out or a lot of construction damage, that's when you'll see ball moss really start to take over a tree. As far as managing ball moss goes, I suggest to most people to prune out the dead wood, any branch that isn't producing leaves, basically, because it's gonna like those branches. And then after that, you know, physically removing it, it's laborious, but that is an option. And then after that, there is a spray for it called Coside 101. That's with a K. But again, it's still going to hold on to the tree for a while. So it's going to take either a storm or, again, physically removing it to actually drop it down from the tree. But again, it's not really causing any harm to the tree. It is an air plant versus something like mistletoe, which is a hemiparasite, and that's actually tapping into the tree and taking water from the tree. So that's more something that is parasitic. Okay. If the tree has been grafted, are the sprouts coming from the rootstock or from the root graft? Oh, that's the one I'm going to have to get back to you on. I'll put my email in it. I'm actually not sure on that. Okay, I think I got them all. All right. Let's go back to, would y'all rather hear about pruning or about hill country trees? Do you want to put it in the chat? We can do proper pruning or hill country trees. Any thoughts? Both. I'm getting some for trees. Okay. Let's go through that. Okay. All right. Okay, so for large trees, we have bald cypress, oak, cedar elm, and chinkapin oak, and live oak. So bald cypress, I'm not really going to go through everything here. I'm happy to share some of these slides, though, if y'all would like. You know, obviously to know about this tree is that it needs a lot of water. You know, actually, my dad has a bald cypress that has the gray water going to it, and it's doing really well for being in an urban area. But you will need a lot of water for bald cypress. Bur oaks, a great oak tree to plant, but keep in mind that they have very large acorns. I call from a lady in Hunt saying, "What can I do about this? They keep hitting my roof and they're so loud." So that's definitely something where you have to think of the right place to plant the tree for something like that. But nice big leaves. They are deciduous, so they will lose their leaves in the winter. And very adaptable. Cedar elms. I really like cedar elms. This is a tree I suggest a lot of times for people who are impacted by oak wilt and they want to plant something else. I like that they are really bright green in the spring. That's some of the first trees that I notice in the spring. They're lime green. All they get that nice golden color, but they are deciduous, so they're going to lose their leaves.
Not getting your, yeah, there you go. It's a little late on the when you're shifting your PowerPoint. We're not getting we're not getting the pictures as quickly as you're talking about them.
Oh no, okay. So you can see the cedar elm slide now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about turning off my Wi-Fi on my phone, so hopefully that'll help the internet connection here. And it's a widespread and adaptable tree. Did it switch slides?
No, not yet.
Oh man, it seems like my voice is lagging too.
It's a little delayed. Okay, now we got the chinkapin oak.
Okay. So this is an alkaline adaptable tree, so good for our soils. It is a medium to large tree again. It has moderate growth. It's an excellent wildlife tree. A lot of things like the acorns, deer, turkeys, things like that. And oak wilt typically isn't seen in this tree, although it has been found to occur in chinkapin oaks. It's not one of those ones that's highly known for a lot of mortality because of oak wilt. Okay, did it switch?
Yes.
Yay, okay, good. All right, and then of course our Texas live oak, Quercus fusiformis. So closer you get to the coast, that's actually Quercus virginiana, but both are live oaks, but we do have a different live oak over here in the hill country. It's semi-evergreen, which means that the new leaves are being put on as the old leaves are falling off, and sometimes that gap is bigger in some trees than others. And so I get a lot of calls around March, February, April, people thinking they have oak wilt, but really the tree is just going through that leaf change. And oftentimes I won't even go out on site visits in that time frame, just because we can't really tell anything until the new leaves fully emerge. And that's when I like to look for oak wilt. From then on, usually late April, May, and then till the end of the year. But obviously oak wilt is a major concern with this tree. My job is 90% helping people with oak wilt, talking about oak wilt, helping HOAs and cities pass ordinances and things like that. So I'd love to talk about oak wilt if y'all ever would like to hear about it. All right, moving on to medium trees. We have Anaqua, lacy oak, little walnut, Texas ash, and Texas madrone. All right, so Anaqua, also known as sandpaper tree or knockaway, the leaves are very rough texture. They do feel like sandpaper. This is a semi-evergreen tree with dark green leaves. You know, adaptable to this area. I don't see it often, but it is a really neat tree and it has those deep, pretty leaves if that's something that you're looking for. Lacy oak, also known as blue oak. This tree is most found in my area. So I cover like Bexar County in the west, all the way to Edwards County. And so I do see a lot of lacy oak in my area. It's also known as blue oak because it does have that tint of blue, especially in the fall. It is a deciduous tree, but they hold on to their leaves a little bit longer into the winter. It can get oak wilt. So, you know, with live oaks, we see oak wilt move through the root system and it just takes down trees like dominoes. And if it gets in a live oak, a lacy oak motte, it can do the same kind of thing where it moves through. You know, again, less common just because this is a less common tree in the hill country, but I have, you know, tested, you know, sent in samples of lacy oaks that have tested positive for oak wilt, and I've seen it where it kind of moved along a hillside. Not as destructive as in live oaks, but it can be a concern. But this is a great tree. It's pretty slow growing. It's good for, you know, smaller areas like suburban areas. Good tree for a front yard. All right, little walnut. So this is smaller than Arizona walnut. It's often multi-trunked, very small nuts in the husk. You know, but a great native tree, little walnut. All right, Texas ash. So this is the only recommended ash tree for the Edwards Plateau. It has some reliable fall color as well. You know, and speaking of ash trees, you know, something that we are looking out for is the emerald ash borer. It's a boring beetle. It's in Northeast Texas right now. And it's something that we monitor for every year. So I set up these little sticky traps with bait to monitor them. I put them in San Antonio and it's just not this south yet. It's not in Austin, but fingers crossed that this invasive beetle does not come this far south because there are a lot of trees, especially in San Antonio, that are ashes. It was a popular tree to plant, not Texas ash, but so that's something to keep in mind. Texas madrone, one of my favorites. This is an evergreen tree, so if you are looking for something that's going to keep their leaves all year long, this one is great. It has that beautiful exfoliating bark, you know, red on the outside and then that light cream color on the inside. You have to have good drainage for this tree though. It doesn't like sitting in water. And it does have those red berries, which are edible and good for wildlife. All right, moving on to trees for fall color. American smoke tree, I don't see this one that often, or maybe I'm not keeping an eye out for it enough, but it has these cool flowers in the springtime. That's how it gets its name, because it looks like a smoke plume. But in the fall, it has that reliable fall color, bright orange and yellow. This one really can't be pampered too much. It doesn't like to be overwatered or over-fertilized. Big tooth maple obviously is a great fall colored tree. It likes the shaded canyons. And then escarpment black cherry I think someone had this as their photo cover just a second ago. Great wildlife tree. It does have that fall color, yellow and orange in the fall, and can be highly adaptable. And then flame leaf sumac or prairie sumac, obviously really bright. You see it driving down on the roadsides in the fall, that bright orange red color. It can root sucker to form colonies, and it likes rocky slopes. And then we have our Texas red oak. This includes, well, red oaks is a family of oaks, and that includes Texas red oaks, also called Spanish oaks. And then you also have other red oaks, including like Shumard oak or blackjack oak. And oak wilt is a main concern for this tree. It's kind of the epicenter of where oak wilt starts, because when these get infected, they produce a fungal mat where the beetles visit, pick up spores, and then spread it to new areas. So that happens on a red oak. But they do have great fall red colors. People ask me if they should get rid of all their red oaks because of oak wilt, because it could cause or start, you know, a new center. And I say no, just keep an eye out for sudden changes of color. So with red oaks, we're just looking for it to flag, meaning, you know, it just changes color at the wrong time. So middle of summer, early summer, if the tree is turning red quickly, it takes like 4 to 6 weeks with red oaks. That's what we want to look out for. And if so, then we probably want to remove it to make sure we're not letting that fungal mat produce under the bark. All right, should I stop there? I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time.
Finish.
Okay. All right, so desert willow, let's see. All right, so desert willow is a great tree with those purple flowers. They do have a high heat tolerance. It's a great xeriscape plant. You don't want to overwater this guy. Then we have little leaf lead tree. I really like this one. I don't see it a lot, but I love this spherical yellow flowers that they produce. It's thornless, and it does kind of have like an open, thin canopy. More commonly seen like in South Texas. Mexican plum. This is usually the first tree to flower in March, so great for that. You know, the bees love it. Just a really pretty spring tree. And then Texas crabapple. This is a slow growing tree, and it's a small tree, but again, another great one with flowers. And Texas redbud, this is one of my favorites with those purpley pink blooms in the spring. This is a tree that I recommend for people, like if they live in some place where the HOA requires that you have 2 trees in your front yard, and it was built with like 2 small live oaks, and you know, like we talked about the root space, and obviously 2 live oaks in a front yard is probably not going to go well. And then, you know, once they get too big, then you can't grow grass underneath. So this is one of my suggestions for a smaller tree, along with maybe a medium or bigger tree to put in your front yard if you're trying to meet that 2 tree minimum. Just because it is a smaller tree and it has that great spring color, and then the nice big heart-shaped leaves. All right, I'll go quickly through these. Just for wildlife, ash juniper, although right now I'm sure a lot of us are struggling with cedar fever. It is a great tree for the golden cheek warbler, especially those mature ash junipers. They use the bark for nesting. They strip off that bark. Osage orange, I don't see this a lot, also called bodark. The squirrels love those big fruits. Possum haw, y'all were talking about this before we started. This is a deciduous tree, so yopon is evergreen, whereas possum haw is deciduous. So if you ever don't really know which one you have, because they do look really similar, wait till winter and you'll figure it out that way. And then the fruits are liked by wildlife. And then sugarberry, you know, I hear all the time that this is a trash tree, but if you have one, I mean, people probably won't go out and plant a new sugarberry or hackberry, but if you have one, it is really great for wildlife. All right, other nice trees, white shin oak. These are small scrubby oaks. Eve's necklace pod. It's in the same genetic family as Texas mountain laurel, but they have these cool leaves with the coffee bean looking leaflets. Mescal bean, which is y'all's Texas mountain laurel tree of the month. Obviously a great tree, it's evergreen, and then it has those really great smelling flowers. And of course our state tree, pecan. It does need more bottomlands though, so you know, if you live on a place on the top of our rocky hills, this probably won't do well, but if you are in a place with, you know, well drained and rich soil, this is a great tree, obviously. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna put these in the chat for y'all. These are really great websites. The first one is that one that I was mentioning where it lets you pick what county and what characteristics in a tree you want. Like, do you want it to be evergreen? Do you want it to be good for wildlife? Do you want fall color? How much space do you have? It goes through all of that. Let's see. Okay. Oh, come on. There we go.
Erin, can you check to see if there's any questions?
Yes. Okay. I can share the presentation. I'll put it into a PDF format. Okay, so someone's having trouble with the porcupine removing the bark and the cambium layer, which is the live wood of a tree. Roughly half the trunk circumference on 3 of our trees. What are the chances of survival? Yeah, I mean, if you can put a cage around that tree, try to do that. I would wait till the spring to see what kind of leaf production they had and then go from there. Those wounds are hard for the tree to seal, but I would at least wait for spring to monitor and then go from there. Oh man.
If I catch the porcupine, it does not have much of a chance of survival.
The porcupine doesn't? Right.
Not really. I'll catch and release it.
Ah, okay. Okay, I'm going to put these links in the chat, and then I will go back. Here. Someone said they wanted this, so there's that. That's my email. Our Facebook, I mean, we have a official Texas A&M Forest Service Facebook and Instagram, but the Central Texas Woodlands, you can just find us by typing in CTex Woodlands. We post just little facts or events or whatever's going on, so follow us there. And let's see. Desert willow, should it have a leader?
I bought a Texas willow, and it's about, it's in a 5-gallon pot. It's about a foot tall, and it's got 2 leaders coming out of it. Should I cut one of them off?
I would if they're pretty even. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be open growth, kind of that decurrent structure. But right now, I would go ahead and let one be the leader.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Ooh, smoke tree. Is that a male or a female? I don't know that one. I'm sorry. I do know like Yopon, they're male and female. Smoke tree. I'll write that down. I'll answer the questions that I don't know and send them to Lorraine, if that's okay.
That's me. I mean, I'm the one asking the question.
Sure, that's fine, Erin.
Okay. All right, Cynthia. Which are best? Sharon, I would go to that website, the Texas Tree Planting, and type in, you know, that you want a small tree with color. Off the top of my head. I mean, it just depends.
Erin,
I'm
sorry.
I would think Texas Redbud would do well. I don't know specific, I mean, my specialty isn't really with bees and pollen, but that'll be an email one for you. I actually did have someone reach out to me that's starting a nonprofit for trees that attract bees for people affected by oak wills. I thought that was interesting. Okay, any other ones? Please send me an email. I'm happy to answer. Sorry, I didn't know the answer to all of them. Again, I mostly have to give people the unfortunate news that their trees are dying of oak wilt and help them manage it. So I spend most of my time doing that, but I like the challenging questions, and I thank y'all again for having me.
Well, thank you. Excellent job. And we appreciate your time.